Welcome to the Author Blurb podcast. I'm your host, Eric Maynard, and I'm here to talk with as many authors as I can. So thank you for being here. Take the time, enjoy the show, reach out to the authors through the website authorblurb.com and learn more about them, and feel free to reach out to them. The Author Blurb, where readers and authors connect. So this is Author Blurb again, and I'm here with Nina Elena, talking to her about her book all about homeschooling. And forgive me, is it 17 years of homeschooling experience? I forget that it's a long title. I know that I'm planning on buying it myself just because I'm going to be homeschooling my kid and he's going into kindergarten. So there's a whole lot that I'm going through just getting lined up. Your book is one of the reading lists on that to help me with it. To help me out, Nina, if you would, I appreciate you being here because, one, I really want to know a lot, and hopefully I can find out as much as I can in the time we have. Can you tell everybody a bit about yourself, about your book, and things like that so we can learn more of it?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love getting the word out. This is great. I'm excited to hear that this is something you're interested in because it's becoming an even bigger movement than it was 17 years ago. And so, hearing that podcast hosts as well are looking into it is very exciting. The numbers have grown exponentially since COVID, obviously. So, 17 years I've been homeschooling our children. Two of them are adults now and out in the world. So I kind of have a tested method. That was really important to me when I got started with homeschooling. I wanted to go, when I very first began homeschooling, I wanted to see the end result. I wanted to see people who had done it from preschool all the way through graduation and had adult children and kind of see, does this really work? Is it good? And are the children coming out to be responsible adults who are able to make their way in the world and articulate and things like that? So I wanted to see that, and that's why in the title it says, help, I just pulled my kids out of school, guidance from 17 years of homeschooling, because that's what I was looking for, people who had done it and been successful.
All right. Now, how many kids have you homeschooled? You said two of them are adults. It sounds like you are still homeschooling some.
Yeah, so we have 3 children, and we also were foster parents, so we homeschooled a lot of children.
Well, I know just getting ready to homeschool a kindergarten feels like a lot. It sounds like you definitely have your hands full with all that you have going on. What really do we find, or what topics do you cover in your book that's going to help somebody like me, for an example, who is just getting homeschooling, is wanting, because from statistically, homeschooling kids tend to be more advanced than public school. They also have a better mannerisms. I think I've even heard people mention that they can tell the difference between a homeschool kid and a public school kid just by talking with them. So that's what's driving me to do it. And what tools, since I have that urge now, and I imagine other people listening to this as well, what is it in your book that's going to help us be able to say, okay, this is what I need to do to be able to teach my kids?
Well, and I think you come at the perfect point, and you're asking the right questions. Kind of like when you got into podcasting, it's like you're learning a whole new language and learning about almost a whole new career in homeschooling. It's basically turning your home into a learning environment. It doesn't mean making a schoolroom in your house necessarily, and we talk about that in the book, but it's just learning, and we cover all this. I cover all this in the book. What is homeschooling? What is it really? Because those results that you're talking about are absolutely true. As our children graduated and went into college, actually they went into college before they graduated. Their teachers were saying the same thing. Their college professors were saying, "Wait a second, you're the only one who pays attention in class, and you know the answers to this. And how come you know about history? Were you homeschooled?" And then, yeah, I was. And so they're like, "Wow," and my kids would come home with these stories of how their professors would say that. And that was really encouraging to me. I was like, yes, okay, you did it right. But yeah, the questions that you're asking are absolutely the questions everyone has. And so I make sure to cover in the book what I would have wanted to know the first couple of years. Because even a couple of years in, you're still pretty new at it. You would still be considered a newbie because you're finding out all of the different information that's out there. You'll hear people talk about things like pods, homeschool pods. You'll hear them talk about things like co-ops and charter schools and homeschools and traditional homeschooling and unschooling. And all of these are brand new concepts to someone who's not been in the homeschooling world. So I go through and define all of them, explain each of them to you, tell you the pros and cons of each, and then kind of help you decide what your first year of homeschooling could look like, what suits your family best, because there's really no one way that's the only way, and how you can pick and choose from those to create something in your own home that works great for you and your child, because you may have a certain way that you learn, but your child may have a completely different way.
Absolutely. Now, you're mentioning multiple different portions in terms like the co-ops and the pod. Pod is something I'm not familiar with myself, but like one thing that we found we're doing with our son is we're teaching him certain subjects at home, but we have a company that does classes for homeschoolers. That also allows them to socialize and learn at the same time. What so but when we started, our thought was is we're looking at like one program to do everything, and we found out that that's not the case after screaming and yelling and saying, "Hey, I know it's out there." What what do you help people get their foot started or get their foot in the door to be able to understand what's happening?
And I keep saying we, I don't know why. My family, I'm the only one
Right.
writing the book, but my family, let's pretend we're a we. I explain all of that in the book, and what I explain is that there are curriculum that go through everything for you. Abeka is one of my favorites, Abeka. Abeka has been around, I want to say, for like 40 years, and they have been helping homeschoolers teach their children for that 40 years. They cover everything. They cover every subject. They do it either by DVD or virtually or online, or you can do it at home with just the books, and they have teacher instruction manuals and tell you everything to say right on the chalkboard, all that stuff. They have complete A to Z, everything you need for your entire year, every year, from really like 2 and 3 year old preschool all the way up through graduating high school. And then they actually have a college as well that kids can go off to, Pensacola Christian College. So there are curriculum that take you through everything, that cover everything. When you buy the curriculum grade, so if you bought like first grade curriculum, it would come with your books, all the student books, all the workbooks, all the teacher books, any manipulatives you need, like flashcards or dice or whatever things they would need for that. They come with everything. So those things are available. I don't like to have children sit in front of a computer all day long. So what I like to do is maybe we do language and history with Abeka, and then maybe we do science, like you said, with a class, but everybody's together, their age, they're doing the experiments together, they're interacting with other kids, and then maybe a PE class or a PE get together for volleyball or soccer or something like that with friends in the homeschool group. And so there's all kinds of ways to mix and match so that we have something that's hands-on, something that's on the computer, something that's at a desk, something that's outside, something that's in a class. So they're kind of moving around and doing their thing.
Okay. Now, with just getting started and with trying to figure everything out, I know one thing I'm learning as well is there's a whole lot more than me just saying, forget the public school, I'm going to start teaching and do that. There's forms, there's contacting the public schools to say, hey, my kid will not be attending you, and going through all these things, at least here in Virginia. And I know, like I have people I know that are in other parts of the country that have different ways they have to be able to homeschool their kids. And I guess Virginia is kind of easier in comparison to some of the other things I've heard. What is it really? What tools do you have, or do you have the tools in your book that help people start finding ways to achieve this?
I do actually, and one of the resources that, and I'm not holding anything back. Nothing that I'm telling you is, well, you can find out if you buy the book. I'm just giving you information now. We just go more into depth in the book.
Understand.
HSLDA, and that's HSLDA, is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And if you go onto their website, they will tell you state by state what it is you need to do to homeschool in your state. And you're right, Virginia is actually really easy, which is great. There are certain states where it's better to use a cover or an umbrella school, which is basically somebody usually in their home, but it can also be an actual school that acts as the middleman between you and the state government. And so basically you just, fill out their form that says, I'm using you as an umbrella school or a cover school. If anyone were to ask me, where my kids go to school, they officially go to your school, even though I'm doing all the homeschooling at home, even though I choose the curriculum. All you do really is give them maybe your shop records, grades mid-year and end of the year, and tell them what you're teaching. And basically, they just become the middleman if you don't want to have to deal with any government interference. And that's really nice, and a lot of states have that. So that is definitely something that when you go to HSLDA and you click on your state, it will tell you if that's an option for you. Virginia is very easy. It's great. They've really done a good job of making homeschooling legal and easy to do. And I think that's because HSLDA is in Virginia. So they do a lot of work there. And actually, I had one of the homeschool veterans that I looked to when we got started. I had her do some Vicky Says segments in the book. And so she gives her advice from actually homeschooling 17 children.
Okay.
So she did it. I did it for 17 years. She did 17 children. And so, foster kids and things that she had. She didn't
right.
do for 17 children.
I was going to say, wow, that's... My wife's talking about a third kid, and that just seems exhausting to me.
Right? 17 would be way too many for me.
Yes. So
but she did foster kids and stuff, and so she actually gives her insights in there as well. You know what's really odd, though? We looked one time, we were about to move, and we were looking at states and what their homeschool laws were. And my thought was, well, there's a state where I know people do things differently, and they're very, very old-timey. I'm trying to give you some hints so you can kind of think of what that state might be. And I bet their homeschool laws there are awesome. And so I looked up the laws for homeschool in Pennsylvania because of Amish country. And I looked it up there, and they were some of the worst in the country.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Crazy?
So, but I know, yeah, that's kind of what threw me off is some of these places you expect to be more down to earth, more grassroots kind of thinking and way of doing stuff. They are really not necessarily that way. So that's kind of what shocked me about Virginia being, because Virginia does have a very progressive side to them, or a very liberal side to them. So with that, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to fight. I'm going to have to do all this to get my son homeschooled. And it turned out they're like, yeah, you just fill out this form and call these people and you're good. I'm like,
yep, all done.
Oh, yeah, so, I mean, it made it quite easy there. But one thing that, I'm concerned about, and I know kindergarten, for example, they don't have the curriculum. You just have to do the testing, or you don't have to have a accredited system for kindergarten. But first, second, and on, you have to have some kind of accreditation to be able to do those teachings. Is that...
That's not quite accurate.
Okay, help me understand this then.
I know, it really is confusing in the beginning. It really is. And I do cover it in the book, luckily. I do go through what each grade should be being taught. So for your son's grade, you'd be looking at things like math and learning how to read, if he doesn't already read, shapes and colors, that sort of thing. So there are, like I said, with Abeka, and that's just one of many, I don't know, choose from maybe 60 different curriculum out there that have workbooks for every single subject. So you've got your history workbook, your science workbook, your language arts, your cursive, all these things. They do have that all for pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, every single grade. Accreditation is not necessary in any state. You don't have to be accredited, you don't have to be a teacher, and the materials you use don't have to be accredited.
All right.
So you can do whatever you want.
Okay, now why I don't know if this is discussed, but why is that the mentality then that everyone thinks? Because, like I said, I was heard that in kindergarten, it doesn't have to be accredited, but once you get to a certain point, they have to have a accreditation or you have to have some kind of certification to show that they passed the class.
No, you don't actually. All you have to do in order to show that a child has passed a certain class, like say science, is you
Mm-hmm.
have to say this is what grade they earned in that class this year.
All right.
That's it.
Now, now, do you discuss record keeping? And
Yes.
because I listen to a lot of homeschooling podcasts trying to get my understanding of it, and it seems like every one of them talks about having a huge binder or an accordion folder of records of the kids and what they did and all this. Do you discuss the type of records and the type of things that parents should keep? Because, call me funny, my son, I'm not going to keep every one of his scribbly line pictures and say, look, this is what you did in kindergarten, even though my ma seemed to have everything I've ever done, which, be honest with you, once she gave it to me, it either is in the garage or in the dumpster somewhere. But I don't think all that needs to be kept. Do you discuss the different things that parents do need to keep records and why
I
we
sure
need to do
do.
it?
I sure do. And basically, the reason that you're keeping records, I keep them because I just like to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but basically, you're just keeping records to make sure that if you ever got a knock at the door, you ever got some nosy neighbor who decided, I don't know, for some reason they got mad because you weren't mowing your side of the lawn and they decided to pick on you about something. So they decided to call and, call the school district and say, this kid's not going to school. I think that's the reason that most people keep records of things. It's just, for a backup for an emergency situation like that, that you could ever, if anyone ever came to your door, if Child Protective Agency or something came to your door, you could pull out a folder that just said, well, this is, here's page 1 and page 30 and page 60 from his cursive book. Here's, a couple pages of his science stuff. This is what he drew for this. And you have, for the year, maybe 20 or 50 pieces of paper that show that during the year he's been doing things for school. Because there are people that, are horrible people and are, abducting children or are not schooling their children. So their children are at home doing absolutely nothing, but they're saying they homeschool. Those are the ones that give everybody, of course, a bad name.
Right.
And we talk about that in the book, too, that sometimes when you go and talk to a public school teacher or you talk to a child protective services person, just that you might meet, at church or somewhere that you're meeting and talking with them, the only experience that person may have with homeschooling is somebody who was not homeschooling and just calling it that and actually, abusing their children or educationally neglecting them. They get them taken away or they get them forcibly put into school, and that's all the teacher sees of homeschooling. So other
Right.
than public school kids, all they see are these kids who were emotionally or educationally neglected. And so that's what they think all homeschoolers do. So that's when you get people that have a bad taste in their mouth for homeschooling, is they're like, well, those kids don't, they don't bathe and they don't learn anything and all. And you're like, that is like the extreme. That would be
Right.
like saying every kid in foster care represents every child that was ever born, and you can't do that.
Right. So here's another issue with neglect and things like this is my wife's biggest concern because I actually got on the homeschooling bandwagon before my wife did, and she eventually got on there with me. So my job now is to keep her on the wagon with me as long as I can.
Yes.
But one thing that she was hugely scared of, and her big issue until we got this company that we work with now here in Virginia that does the groups and things like that I discussed, she was afraid of socialization.
Yes.
Homeschoolers they're unsocial, they don't know how to deal with other people. I've heard that literally as I talk to people about homeschooling, and it seems like other than that's one of the myths that I hear of homeschoolers don't know how to play or don't know how to interact with other kids.
Yes. I think I'm going to look at my table of contents real quick because I think I call that aren't homeschooler kids weird? What about socialization? Aren't they uncool? So it's like, yeah, these are all the things that we're afraid of. It's going to be that kid that, you go to introduce yourself to the family and the kid like tucks behind and won't say hello and all that. And it could not be further from the truth. Obviously, there are children who are like that in general.
Right.
That are extremely introverted or extremely shy. And whether you homeschool them or don't homeschool them, that may be an issue. But overall, as you've learned, homeschoolers do socialize better within all age groups because they're used to being around adults and kids and that sort of thing. I do talk about how to take care of that, which is things like your homeschool group in your area. You should join as many of them as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go on Facebook and look for all the homeschool groups in your area, reach out to people, find out what there are. There should be a weekly park day every single week. There should be a field trip group. There should be, some different meetup groups that get together at least once a week, maybe more, that will give your child another opportunity to socialize. What ends up happening is when we go to the grocery store, when my kids were younger, sometimes people would say, oh, why aren't you guys in school? Is it a day off or whatever? My kids would say, oh, I'm homeschooled. And I'm like, look, I don't want to discuss this with the checkout person. Like, I don't care. It's great that we homeschool and great that you're excited about it. But do I really need to tell the person checking out the groceries our entire life story? No. That's
right.
But they would do that, and I didn't want to, stop them because they were excited. But one of the things they would say is, I always wanted to do that, or I know somebody who did that, or, the only question they would have is, what about socialization?
Right.
And my standard response was, I know. Like, that is really a big concern. Like, we have so many social activities all week long. I'm like, no, we have to stay home and get our school done because we are way too social. And they just kind of look at you like, and I'm like, yeah. Like that is all of our biggest concern, and it is the least concern because very soon you'll get plugged in and start meeting people and hearing about things, and it will actually be a problem because you'll be like, no, we can't leave 5 days a week, 8 hours a day to go do all these fun things. We need to stay home sometimes and do school.
Right. Well, that's definitely interesting to hear because, like I said, to me, I do want my son to be socializing with other kids. Now, what other topics do you address in your book? Because I know that there's a lot that I don't know. And just getting my feet into the water now to take my son into homeschooling, I'm learning more and more every day. I have history books that I've already got my son first grade reading for kindergarten. I got all this stuff because my son, one, is incredibly smart, which I don't know where he got it because it wasn't for me on that. My ability to read really stinks throughout school years and all this. I didn't really become a good reader until afterwards, or a better reader, I should say. My son, just entering into kindergarten, already reads almost at the end of a first grade level.
That's fabulous.
So, I think so too, but not because of me. I cannot take too much credit on that one. But what is it that we need, as parents, need to be prepared, or what do you discuss in your book that we need to know that we don't know? What topics?
There's so much. That's just it. It's like you said, it is like learning an entire new career overnight. All of a sudden, it's all thrown at you. And that's why I tried to make it so simple. Like, I could have made the book 10 times thicker, but I thought, no, let's just make it as thin as possible to get people started who are exactly where you are right now. Either they have already started and they're still kind of feeling like they don't have their sea legs yet, or they're just about to get started and it's overwhelming. It is drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information, and part of the problem is that you're hearing information from people who are dealing with junior high kids and high school kids. And so when they're saying, keep records and do this, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, but how does that apply to preschool and kindergarten and first grade? And it doesn't quite the same way. And so I do break that all down so that you're not so overwhelmed. Basically, I want to take the overwhelm out of it, make it really easy to grasp what homeschooling is and what it isn't. All the terminology, so when we talk about things, you're not like, I don't know what that is. I explained it all so that you don't feel so overwhelmed and lost. And we just take it step by step. This is how you get started. This is how you structure your day. This is where you can find, all 10 different curriculums that I would recommend looking into. Look at those. This is how you can structure your very first year, and that will be the easiest way for you to learn how to do what you're doing, for your kid to understand how this works. I tell you how to arrange your house, different ideas, and none of them are, you have to do this. It's like, here's an idea, you can try this. And then I also take you through 3 different people's homeschool day. And so 3 different people tell what their homeschool day looks like. One with, I think, 7 kids, 6 or 7 kids, one with 3 kids, and one with 1 kid. And so we take you through what each of those days look like for them so you can understand their homeschool philosophy, how they make it work with different age children, and kind of get a glimpse into other people's lives so you can go, oh, I want to steal from that one, and I'm going to steal from this one, and I'm going to come up with my own plan.
All right. Now, here's another thing that I constantly heard people when I talked about homeschooling, because again, for a while here, I've been looking into it and talking as much as I can. I hear, well, I have to work for a living. Well, and my big thing is I work from home. So I can have my son here. I can take him to classes. I can work remotely, which does give me that flexibility.
Yes.
What do you say to people that that's their excuse for not homeschooling is I have to work?
I actually cover that in the book.
I was
That's
hoping
a great
so.
question. It's really a matter of priority, and I really take you through that on there, as well as some of the questions that get asked, because there are 2 things that happen with that. You have one where you have someone say, well, I have to work, so we both have to work, or I'm a single mom, so we can't do it. And so I give examples of single moms homeschooling and how they make that work and what plan we came up with together. I do that kind of on the side where I help other new homeschoolers or homeschoolers that have been doing it for a while to kind of come up with a better plan. And so I did work with one mom that is a single mom, and I tell you exactly how we made that work and how she was able to take her child to school to work with her, and what curriculum we used to make that happen so it could be something that could be accomplished. And there are a lot of people that have to sit down and make that choice. And I talk about that in the book as well. There are people who are very wealthy who then have to go, yeah, all of my friends' kids are in private school and these elite schools, but I really want to homeschool. What is it they have to sacrifice in order to homeschool? And for them, it's their reputation. It's the fact that their peers are going to look down on them like, well, you homeschool, like that's just weird, not understanding how much superior that homeschooling can be to their private school that they go to.
I understand.
So you've got that. You've got middle-class parents who are, we talk about the things that they have to sacrifice in order to do that. We have to sacrifice maybe 2 incomes, and instead have the 1 income, and make things are a little bit tighter because we're making that sacrifice for our children and why we're doing that. I go into that in the book as well. And then also for people who make a lot less money, and like you said, they're saying, well, I have to work. What is it that they're sacrificing? They're sacrificing sometimes to the point of needing government assistance and things like that, because they believe so strongly that their child needs a superior education, a superior environment, and needs their parent to really be there and to help them, in school and in life, and mentor them in that way. And so every type of person is sacrificing to do this, but that's kind of the cool part.
So here's another thing that I have several questions, obviously. So one thing that comes out is I do hear, like, for example, with my boss, when I started discussing homeschooling with him, he did tell me that, hey, you can work your schedule around if I have to work at night or if I have to do this. So I had that flexibility, but that also made me realize that some people could be doing homeschooling in the evenings. Do you discuss the fact of homeschooling doesn't really have a necessary set schedule? So just somebody reading and working like a babysitter, things like that, doing the reading and writing, and then the parent in the evening doing history like they would homework and what so have you. Do you discuss that?
Absolutely. And there are a lot of families who do that, who will do something that's on DVD or on the computer or something while they're at work. So their child would either be sitting next to them or in a room next to them or somewhere else doing the things that they can do independently while their parent is on the computer working or meeting with clients and things like that. And then, like you said, in the evenings or at lunchtime or before work or whatever, it's when you do the stuff that you guys have to do together, or you do on the weekends. And so you find a way to make that happen. And it also determines what kind of curriculum, which is the brand or the type of school books and things that you choose. it depends. It helps you determine what kind of curriculum that you're going to choose. Because if that's the case, if you are working and you need, well, I could use an hour here, an hour there, then something that is on the computer for 1 or 2 subjects would be great. Something that teaches your child for you, and then you do science class with them in the evening or in the afternoon or whatever, things that are hands-on, where obviously you're not going to let them just do that on their own.
Right. Now, another topic that I've heard mentioned on a few of these other podcasts I've listened to is the connection that parents and child end up having compared to public school. And then after that, I want to go back to the private school topic that you discussed that I kind of want to touch on as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that is one thing. It's weird because we tend, at least, okay, I tend to go one extreme or the other.
Right.
So I talk about this in the book as well. I tend to go, okay, this year we're doing everything social. We're going to all the field trips, and we're going to all the events. We're doing all this. And at the end of the year, kind of look at it and go, okay, we got our school done, but we didn't really focus on some of the things I wanted to focus on. Like I would have rather, I don't know, go deeper into this over here, into getting a better grasp on this particular part of math or language or science or whatever. So then the next year I'm like, okay, we're not going to do as many field trips. We're going to do it really hard on the academics. So we really push into that, and we don't go to very many field trips at all. And then that end of the year I look at it and go, okay, we really didn't do a lot of field trips this year, not as many as I would have hoped. And it's like we just bounce back and forth each year. And that's what long-term homeschooling can do, as far as if you make a mistake one year, you can correct it the next year, which is fantastic. And you kind of end up in the middle in the end, where you kind of get everything, the best of both worlds. But it's not because you do everything perfect every year. It's because you kind of bounce back and forth. And I was going somewhere with that. What was your question?
About the relationship between the parent and the child.
Okay, that's where I was going with that. And sorry, I totally forgot.
Understand.
So it's the same thing with the closeness of your children. Sometimes you're going to have really great years where you're bonding and you're going on adventures and you're doing great things. And then some years there's going to be a little more difficult. They're going through puberty, and you're overwhelmed because you just had a new baby, or you moved, or work, or something. And so the same thing with the relationship and with how your homeschool and your family goes. But in the long run, what you end up with are really close family ties and connections, children who call you and want to be connected to you as adults, who are still, oh, this great thing happened. I can't wait to tell my mom or my dad. Or I'm thinking about doing this. I think I'd like to bounce it off of them. And that kind of relationship is really cool.
All right. So what actually drove you to, because homeschooling is a very busy thing to have dealing with. And like you said, you have a handful of kids. I forget, you said 5 kids right now you're homeschooling, if I'm remembering correctly?
I have 1 left. We have 3 that were ours, and then we had foster children as well.
Okay, so you have 1 kid left you're homeschooling. So you've went through 3 kids, foster kids that you homeschool, all these things that you have. That is still a handful of things to try to juggle, especially if they're at different levels or different grades. What was the purpose that you wrote this book, in that you also help? Because I looked at your website, it does have an area where people can reach out to you for help to try to figure out how to homeschool and how to get their things in order. What drove you to actually say, I need to help others get to where I've been?
I'm part of a number of homeschool groups on Facebook, local ones, so that I can see when a field trip's happening, or offer if I have curriculum I'm done with that I want to sell, that sort of stuff. And so that's really great. And part of it was I was seeing a lot. I've been doing it for 17 years.
Right.
So I'm starting to see the patterns. I'm starting to see the same questions that every new person has. Like the questions you're asking, I'm like, those are perfect questions, because and they're covered in the book, because these are the same questions I see over and over and over again. And as a society, we also tend to go one side of the boat or the other. C.S. Lewis really gets into that, about going one direction or the other. And in the homeschooling community, I saw a couple of things. I saw, one, people coming in very lost, because they were coming in from the pandemic. So it was pandemic schooling, not necessarily homeschooling. They were rushing in without any preparation because they wanted to make that change now, which was great, but it was very overwhelming. It would be
Right.
you deciding to homeschool today based only on our conversation right now. You'd be like, I didn't understand half the words she said.
Right.
So I saw that. And then I saw another aspect of that, which is I saw people who had very young children in, preschool, first grade, second grade, third grade, who were doing more of out in nature, very sciencey, very outdoorsy type education. And they were giving advice to these new people, no matter what grade age they were. So if they had a sixth grader, if they had an 11th grader, if they had a first grader, the advice from these people who had been doing homeschool for 3 years were saying, oh, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to keep any records. You don't need to use books. Go out in nature. And I was like, no, like that is not what homeschooling has traditionally been, or
Right.
what most of us consider it to be. That is another way of doing homeschooling, absolutely, but it is not the way, just as the traditional way may not be the way. So I felt like everybody needed a guide. Everybody needed something that said there's this extreme, and you find your in-between that works for you. These are the ways you can homeschool. These are the questions everyone seems to ask. And let's just break it down really easily so that at the end of the book, you know what you're talking about. You could talk to anybody about homeschooling and you'd be like, yes, you're right. Classical education is an option, but it wasn't a good option for our family. And you would know why, because I explained to you what classical education is and the pros and the cons. And then you were able to decide, yeah, that works, or no, it doesn't.
Right. And I'll be honest with you, like you said, somebody like me who's just stepping in, I can't count how many different either courses, styles, classical education, Christian classical. I mean, there's a ton there. So, like you said, anyone just stepping in, and I have an understanding of a lot of the stuff you're saying just because of the fact that I've done the research. But just even 6 months ago, if you and I were talking, I would have been like, well, explain this to me. Explain what a co-op is, what a pod is, what this is. So, I mean, there's a whole lot there, and the information, it seems like from the reviews I saw in your book, even, you provide a lot of great information, a lot of useful tools and things like that people end up using. So what is it that you think people should look at before they homeschool?
Like to do what you did, which is to get as much information as you can. When everybody starts out homeschooling at a different point, and I go through our story of how we began in the book as well. I'm looking over at the book. You can't see it, but I'm looking over it whenever I talk about it, which is weird. I didn't want to homeschool.
All right.
I stayed home with our children. Our oldest was 5. She was going into first grade. She had already done public kindergarten half day. And we had worked to get her into the right school and, drove her because it wasn't, within our district and all this stuff. And we were going to move. And my husband said, really, we're going to end up being in 3 schools in the first 3 months. She would have started at the school we were at. Then we were going to move and stay with his family for a month while we looked for a house. And then we would have found a house not in the same area they were in. And so my daughter would have been in 3 schools in 3 months in first grade. And so my husband goes, you really should look into homeschooling. And I was like, you should look into homeschooling. Like, I am looking forward to the age where they could go off to school and do their, and go be independent, and I could have a little bit of time. And I didn't want to look into it, but then I thought about it. And about a week later, I reached out to the only people I knew that homeschooled and talked with them, and seeing the difference between the Xeroxed 50 times sideways papers that were coming home from school with our daughter and the quality of the homeschool materials I was blown away. I was just like, oh my gosh, like my daughter could be getting better than a private school education at home for a fraction of the price. Are you kidding me?
Right.
That was completely appealing, but it is very overwhelming. And it took me probably another year or 2 before I went to my first homeschool convention, basically because I didn't know they existed. but the homeschool convention is the most wonderful place. It is, I mean, you're talking hundreds of different curriculum vendors with everything set up. And you walk around to all the different booths, and all of a sudden you go, I never understood that in math. And somebody's showing it to you with their, manipulatives, the things that the hands-on things they have. They're showing it to you with that, and it clicks, and you're like, my kid could understand this because now I can understand it. I love this. And you get excited about something ridiculous like math.
Right.
Like, what? How could I be excited about that? And you go to breakout sessions where they've got a keynote speaker for everybody, and then they've got the breakout sessions with somebody who's talking about homeschooling your special needs child, making math meaningful, teaching language arts with the classics, or something that you're struggling with or that appeals to you, and you go listen to it and you hear somebody who's excited about it teach you about it, and then you're like, I have to buy this curriculum and go home and teach my child. This is so exciting.
Well, that sounds fantastic, and I'm actually have to look into them because I didn't even know they existed.
The one in Virginia, the HEAV convention, is the best in the world, and it is right there in Virginia. It has been so much fun. Every once in a while, I've taken my family against my will. I was because I like to get away and just really, focus and just have my own time to write notes and look at things. But when I've taken them, it's been amazing because they pretty much just wander, and everybody else is a homeschool parent, so they're all kind of watching out for each other. You could leave your purse there and nobody would pick it up, or your phone and nobody would steal it. It's just such a great family environment. You learn so many things. The kids get to see people they've only seen on their math video or their, whatever it is they've looked at. And so it's really a cool place.
Well, nice. I'm going to have to look into when the next one here in Virginia is. But with that, I also want to let people know where they can find you and your book. I know it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They can find the links on your website. But where, if somebody wants to reach out to you, do you prefer for them to do so? And if they want to ask questions, what's the best place to go?
Absolutely. So the book is Help, I Just Pulled My Kids Out of School. My name is Nina Elena, and my website is ninahelpsyouhomeschool.com. That's ninahelpsyouhomeschool.com. And on there's also some freebies, some things that tell you what age and stage to teach things to each of your children. So if you have a 3-year-old, it tells you how they learn and what to teach them, and it goes through that. So we've got some freebies on there that you can get just by putting in your email address. And I love to work with parents who are new to homeschooling or just not finding their rhythm. And so you can also book a time with me, and it's on the website, to sit down and let's go through this together over Zoom, or if you're local, then we can meet in person and kind of create a plan for you that is something that works for you and your kids.
Perfect. Well, Nina, I appreciate you being here very much. Literally, if I didn't notice how long we've already talked, I would have kept going. So, be honest with you, I have probably another 6 questions in my head right now that I want to ask. But I imagine you have other things in your day you have to do as well. So with that, I'm going to have you hold on for me for just a second. I appreciate you being here very much. I've enjoyed talking with you. This is going to be the end of the conversation for everybody else, but you and I will talk a little bit more.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. We enjoyed having you here, and I hope you enjoyed listening to the author speak as well. So now, take the time, subscribe, reach out to the authors, and go and buy their books. Let other people know about their books, about the show, and help grow both our communities. The authors would love to hear from you as much as I would. So thank you again. I hope you have a good day, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.